Imagine this one morning you wake up and you're holding in your hands a lifetime of savings enough to buy a house. But when you step into the market, it's only enough to buy a single chicken egg. That isn't a scene from a post-apocalyptic movie. It's a raw reality that people in Venezuela have had to endure for more than a decade. And even in the early days of 2026, that nightmare shows no sign of ending. In today's geopolitics, there's a term for this: the weaponization of the economy. If the United States cannot topple Maduro through a military coup, it will carry out an economic execution campaign. The goal is not to destroy buildings, but to destroy trust, the only invisible chain that keeps a society from collapsing into chaos. Welcome to the real world, where there are truths society doesn't want you to know. The silent killer, when paper replaces value. We often hear about Venezuela's inflation figures, thousands, even millions of percent. But those dry numbers still don't fully convey the real devastation. The true devastation is the murder of human time and effort. In Caracas, people once had to weigh money on a scale instead of counting it. Bolivar banknotes, symbols of national sovereignty, were thrown all over the streets because their value was lower than the cost of cleaning them up. When a currency collapses, every moral value and every layer of social order collapses with it. So why did this happen? Western media will tell you it's all because of Maduro's incompetence. That's not entirely wrong, but it's only half the truth. Even with poor governance, it is extremely difficult for a country's GDP to shrink by 75% in just over a decade, from 2013 to 2026, without an external hand pressing down. In Venezuela, hyperinflation is not merely a natural economic phenomenon. It is a chain reaction that was deliberately triggered. When the United States imposed more than 150 sanctions and froze over $40 billion in international banks, it wasn't only about stopping Maduro from buying weapons. It also blocked Venezuela from buying medicine and spare parts needed to keep the oil industry running. Most importantly, it cut off access to foreign currency, Venezuela's ability to stabilize the exchange rate. And when a country cannot export its main product, oil, while also being pushed out of the international financial system, its currency inevitably goes into freefall. To keep social welfare programs alive and to hold the military in place, the government is forced to print money relentlessly. And that is when the trap snaps shut. The United States didn't need to fire a single bullet to wreck Venezuela's economy. It only needed to create an environment where printing money became the only path left, an inevitable act of economic suicide. Psychological warfare, attacking the stomach to change the mind. Remember, this hyperinflation is an advanced psychological weapon. The ultimate objective of economic sanctions was not to drain Maduro's treasury, because as discussed in previous episodes, Russia and China could pump oxygen into the finances if needed. The real objective was to break the will of the middle class and the poor. When a father cannot afford milk for his child, when a mother has to watch her child lose weight for lack of protein, people stop caring about anti-imperialism or national sovereignty. Fear and despair ferment into anger, and Washington calculated that eventually that anger would turn toward Miraflores Palace. This is a war of cruel choices. Stay loyal to the government and starve, or support change even if imposed by foreign powers in exchange for a piece of bread. The United States turned the Venezuelan people's stomachs into a battlefield by pushing prices into the unimaginable. It triggered a mass exodus. More than 7 million people had left the country by the end of 2025. This wasn't only a humanitarian crisis, it was a tactic to drain the opponent's brainpower. The youngest, most talented, most energetic people left, leaving behind a nation exhausted of labor and talent. That is how you erase a country's future without aircraft carriers or modern fighter squadrons. The trump card: quiet dollarization and surrender at the level of perception. The greatest irony here is this: while Maduro denounces the hegemony of the US dollar, Venezuela's economy has become intensely dollarized just to survive. When the bolivar became trash, people started trusting the US dollar more than any promise from the government. The dollar became the only true measure of value, and that is Washington's final victory, a surrender of perception. The United States doesn't need to occupy Venezuelan territory because it has already occupied Venezuelans' wallets and their economic thinking. Even if Maduro remains in power, real power, the power to determine prices and the value of labor, still ends up in the hands of the US Federal Reserve. Every time the Fed raises interest rates, a street vendor in Caracas feels the pain. That is a new kind of slavery, financial slavery. The truth behind the numbers in 2026. Entering 2026, inflation in Venezuela is still projected to remain above 600%. The government has attempted multiple currency reforms, repeatedly removing zeros from banknotes. But those are only painkillers for a metastatic cancer. Washington understands that time is on its side. As long as the siege and embargo continue, so long as trading in any currency other than USD remains risky and expensive, Venezuela will stay trapped in the vortex poverty, printing money, inflation, despair. This is a systematic blueprint. Washington is using Venezuela as a warning to any country in Latin America and even in Asia that might be thinking of rebelling. The message is clear. We may not overthrow you with guns, but we can make you kneel and beg to use our currency to buy life. The price of resistance. 21st century warfare is not for the faint-hearted. If you want independence, you must have the capacity for financial and technological autonomy. Venezuela had resources. It had will, but it lacked a financial immune system. Hyperinflation is not an accident. It is a punishment. It is the price a nation pays when it dares to challenge the God that rules the world without a strong enough contingency plan. The lesson from Venezuela is this: true power does not lie in gun barrels. It lies in the purchasing power of the money in your pocket. If you cannot protect the value of your people's labor, you lose this war before it even begins. At this moment, when 2026 begins amid endless turbulence, the world no longer resembles what we knew a decade ago. Venezuela is no longer merely a South American country struggling with hunger. In the eyes of strategists in Washington, Moscow, and Beijing, Caracas is ground zero, the epicenter of a geopolitical explosion, shaking the foundations of the financial system humanity has operated for the past 80 years. Why would a ruined economy and a displaced population become the center of such a massive siege? Because a face-up card has been played. This is no longer a war about whether Maduro will be arrested, tried, and executed. It is a war to answer a larger question. Will the US empire continue to enforce a global dollar tax, or are we witnessing the rise of a new era of chaos? Let's peel back the final layers. Financial weapons. When antibiotics create superbugs. In medicine, if you overdose on antibiotics, you create superbugs. In geopolitics, the United States made a similar mistake by weaponizing the dollar. For decades, Washington treated the ability to cut off access to the global payment system SWIFT as an economic death sentence. They believed that if a country were disconnected from the flow of dollars, it would collapse within months. But Venezuela survived, barely. How? By becoming a survival laboratory. Cornered Venezuela was forced to learn how to operate outside the boundaries of US control. It began using alternative payment systems from China, such as SIPs. It used cryptocurrency to launder oil revenues. It used gold bars to trade directly for food with Russia and Iran. What frightened Washington wasn't that Maduro gained a few extra $1 billion to stay in power. What frightened Washington was that this process proved it could begin to work. That is the lethal point. Every sanction thrown at Caracas only strengthened the immune system of the adversary. Russia became less afraid of being cut off from global finance after watching Venezuela survive. China became less afraid of asset freezes after seeing how Venezuela swapped gold for essentials. The United States accidentally taught the entire BRICS bloc and many developing countries how to live without it. This is the greatest anaphylactic shock of all. Your ultimate weapon becomes scrap metal when the enemy stops fearing it. The truth about US debt. Why Washington must strangle Caracas. We need to look at the numbers to understand why the United States has been so determined to suffocate Venezuela. As of early 2026, US public debt has surpassed $38 trillion, a figure no economy can repay through real productivity alone. The United States can sustain that debt through one mechanism, the dominance of the petrodollar. The rule is simple. The whole world must hold US dollars to buy oil. Because global demand for USD stays high, the United States can print more money to service its debt without triggering immediate hyperinflation at home. In other words, The United States exports its inflation into your pocket, my pocket, and the pockets of Venezuelans. If Venezuela, a country with the world's largest oil reserves, successfully sold oil in yuan or in any other currency, including digital ones, it could trigger a domino effect. Even if only 10% of global oil trade moved away from USD, trillions of dollars could surge back into the United States and spark a hyperinflation that could wipe out the US middle class overnight. So the US assault on Venezuela, its drive to capture or remove the leadership, is not simply because Maduro is a dictator. The United States attacks Venezuela to protect its ability to print paper and exchange it for the world's resources and goods. It is willing to turn Caracas into ruins to ensure no one else on the map gets the idea of betraying the greenback. This is a life and death war for an empire drowning in debt. And in that war, there is no room for compassion or democracy. The cost of sovereignty, an expensive dream. Sovereignty in the 21st century is not given. It must be bought with blood and preparation. The greatest mistake of Hugo Chavez and later Maduro was not wanting independence from the United States. Their mistake was trying to break out before building a strong enough alternative infrastructure. They had oil, but relied on US technology to refine it. They had gold, but stored it in banks in London. They wanted to resist the dollar, but held their foreign reserves in accounts Washington could freeze instantly with the push of a button. Venezuela's resistance was emotional, but it lacked technical calculation. And what was the result? A nationwide social collapse. 2 generations of Venezuelans were sacrificed on the altar of national pride. Over 7 million refugees. A devastated healthcare system. A country once among the richest in South America now had to plead with Russia and China for shipments of grain. This is a cold warning to any nation contemplating departure from the old order. If you do not control your technology, your payment system, and your domestic production base, then sovereignty is merely a poetic name for economic suicide. Venezuela chose the hardest path, and it is paying a price no nation should have to bear. 2 operating systems and Venezuela as the dark bridge. Entering 2026, the cards are face up. The United States no longer hides its intention to use force and financial siege to maintain a unipolar position. Meanwhile, BRICS and rival powers no longer hide their plan to build a new financial wall. The world is splitting into 2 operating systems. One side USD SWIFT and Western values. The other side gold central bank digital currencies CBDCs and bilateral swap agreements among China, Russia, Iran, and Venezuela. In this new order, chaos becomes normal. There will be no single set of rules for everyone. International trade fragments into islands of power, and Venezuela absurdly becomes the dark bridge between the 2 worlds. In Caracas, people use USD to survive day to day, yet the government uses yuan for international trade. It is a mutant existence, a symbol of the transition between 2 eras. Don't become a pawn in the war of perception. Don't fixate only on Maduro or Donald Trump. See the currents of power flowing beneath the surface. Venezuela's story is an indictment of modern geopolitics brutality. It teaches us that money is the most powerful weapon of mass destruction. It can kill a nation without destroying a single building. The strong make the rules. The weak obey or are destroyed. International justice is only a cover for hard financial interests. And third awareness is the only exit. If you don't understand how the world works, you will always be the one who loses when the cards are turned face up. America's attack on Venezuela. The targeting of Maduro, those are only plot details in a script far larger than they appear. A war to redefine who controls humanity's breath for the next 100 years. We are living on the margins of history. What happens in Venezuela today can happen anywhere tomorrow. Don't be the one who arrives late to the war of perception. Equip yourself with a new mental map. Break free from illusions of a fair world and start looking at reality through the eyes of a true player.